My name is David Schalliol, and I'm a graduate student in sociology at the University of Chicago. I have my BA in social and political economy from Kenyon College, and my master's also from the University of Chicago in sociology. The work that I'm involved with, I feel like is really drawing from both the sort of sociological and fine art traditions, since that I'm interested in issues of representation, interested in ways of thinking about urban dynamism and thinking about the way that the built environment is sort of structured by and also reflects the particular kind of human condition. So the works in this series are focused on, obviously, on single residential structures that are set up in such a way that they've lost really their surrounding neighbors. And so what I'm really hoping to get through here is to begin to think about community dynamics, to think about neighborhood history, to be able to think about how different kind of divergent economic processes have created a situation in which we have a unique urban form, and it's an urban form that really reflects, I think, a certain kind of tension between the sort of idealized understanding of what a residence should be, a sort of a suburban home with, you know, a lawn in front of it, or with and a lawn to the side, but instead we're in an urban environment in which there's this sort of tension that we have these very urban buildings that sort of create that tension, really kind of amplify that tension. One of the things that I've done here is I've consistently framed the images in a way that creates that we're sort of able to see the buildings that sort of once were along in sort of the negative space created by them. So in this sort of urban environment where these buildings are sort of, you know, in a sense, they're left behind, that they're aspects of resilience present in it. One of the things that I think is most interesting is thinking about the actual form of the structure compared to the form of other kinds of buildings. So thinking about sort of taking this building, for example, as sort of a quintessential urban structure in the sense that it's boxy, it's narrow, and it sort of evokes a different kind of language than what we might see with, for example, a suburban ranch home. And I think that creates, again, that tension about suggesting, so what is it that's going on with this particular building? It suggests a story of something more. And by taking this image and putting it into a series of other buildings in sort of a similar situation and framing them in a consistent kind of manner, up to sort of sort of intensify or sort of enhance those kinds of associations and also to create different kinds of contradictions. My hope is the questions of being not simply what happens to this building, but what's going on with the phenomena that are causing these kinds of histories. Another example of a building that I think sort of particularly is evocative of this issue is this structure that's obviously sort of a former sort of commercial structure, often actually shares quite a bit with a lot of fire stations in Chicago, but. And this, again, there's a boxy form. It's missing neighbors, and the sort of additional element gets brought into it, and that's the issue of transportation. And as you'll notice in sort of a variety of these images, that there's a particular kind of legacy of transportation, as well as in the presence of transportation that I hope suggests a particular kind of movement sort of through the neighborhoods and sort of through these buildings. So in a sense, we see the L, but also beyond, there's also the 40th Street spur, which used to be a residential and commercial sort of predecessor to really the L on this side of Chicago. In this case, it's the south side. In sort of a similar fashion, this building is also situated on the south side with, again, the 40th Street spur making an entrance. The hope here is that by thinking about the way that these buildings relate to the existing environment and, again, relate to each other, that we can begin to develop these kinds of narratives. And again, we have, in the case of this building down here, which is also on the south side of Chicago, there's the Skyway and the sort of immense elevated structure that enables transportation to occur on the Calumet River and other sort of industrial thoroughfares beyond. So, again, referencing sort of transportation, we've got certain networks of change and industrial presence. again, located in this building is down in Whiting, Indiana, which is where the BP Whiting refinery is. And in the background, there's a particular legacy of not merely sort of the history of the sort of rise and fall of particular neighborhoods in the sort of Rust Belt region, but also thinking about the sort of the issues related to development and how residential structures initially build up right alongside particularly, in this case, sort of behemoth industrial structures. So with this series, I'm hoping to be able to convey this, this imagery, mixing these sort of commercial structures with residential structures with, again, a sort of industrial, commercial, an urban background, in hopes that we can begin to sort of think a little more clearly about what urban change is, about what neighborhood change is, and also to think a little bit about how different photographs relate to each other in that process.